Two guys either side of 50 with one dream to achieve middle-aged sporting glory. This is the Missing Links Golf Show. Welcome back. This is episode 3 of the Missing Links Golf Show. I'm Steve Hinks, joined once again by one of the most magnificent humans on the planet, Andy Walker. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Hinks. How are you?
Mate, I'm well. I'm excited. This is a big show because we're going to talk about our actual development plans tonight. I'm very excited to hear what you've got planned to develop your game. I'm very excited to share what I've got planned. But before we do that, I thought we might just give a little bit of an update from our listeners. And to start with, I am amazed.
Is that our global listeners?
This is our global listeners. That is correct. Because I'm amazed. Not only are we attracting Australian listeners, our home country, we've also got listeners in the USA. So howdy to all you guys over there in the US. Great to have you on board. And we've also got listeners in Japan, Andy Walker. In Japan.
Wow.
So konnichiwa to all of our Japanese listeners. I hope I've pronounced that correctly, and I'm sure I have not. But that's exciting.
As long as it's not au revoir.
I think that's French.
I think it is.
I could be wrong, but or ciao. Also not Japanese, probably Italian. Anyway, this is a golf show. This is not a language show, and we're not here to teach you how to speak various languages. We're here to talk golf.
It wouldn't be overly successful if that was our angle, let me tell you.
It's not our area of strength. No. That is a fact. But we did get some feedback from these listeners, Andy Walker, and I want to share some of that with you. And thank you to everyone that's reached out, either directly or via our Facebook page, which of course is the Missing Links Golf Show. Find us on Facebook. I will drop the link into the show notes actually for this to make it a bit easier for everyone to find us. But a few things that came through, and I was thrilled to get this. I feel like this is incredibly positive feedback. Andy Walker, interested on your thoughts, but I got a message saying it was better than I expected.
Wow, that is quality.
It's glowing. It's definitely glowing.
Well, at least the expectations of our listeners aren't particularly high. So, there's the low bar, which means we're going to overachieve. Regardless of what happens, I feel like we're going to overachieve from that level of expectation.
I actually think there's a lot to be learned on the golf course from this, and that is appropriate expectation setting. Obviously, they thought two blokes, never done this before, having a chat about golf will set the expectation levels quite low. And I don't know if we cleared the bar easily or if we maybe stumbled across it and that had a bit of a wobble, but hey, we'll take it. We also got some great feedback, some very glowing feedback, in fact, by someone who is a little bit of a personality related to the show, and that is the infamous PE teacher, work colleague of mine that set me on this path to self-improvement. For the purpose of the show, we'll call him Paul, largely because that's his name, who gave us some great feedback, but then he unfortunately went and ruined it all because he said that I would have preferred you to describe me as the dashingly handsome ex-PE teacher. Now, Andy Walker, you haven't met Paul, but clearly he has no mirrors in his house. So anyway, that's something that Paul will need to address and have a long, hard look at himself when he listens to this episode.
Well, I always, when my kids are talking and we're talking about superheroes, I always say that my favorite superhero is Thor, because that's who I see when I look in the mirror. And my son has started saying, what, fat Thor? So that's obviously what I see in the mirror, and what my son sees when he's looking at me are very, very different things.
You got one of those slimming mirrors, have you? Is that one of those ones you get at the Easter show?
It must be. Must be.
Nice.
Do you get the slimming mirrors and also the muscle bulk up mirrors? Can you get one? Are they one and the same, or?
Look, I don't know, and I'm not an expert in mirrors, but for anyone that might be listening who is in the mirror manufacturing game, please reach out. Let us know if there's anything that you could do that might reduce overall girth, but potentially increase muscle mass just in a mirror. That would be really helpful.
Mm.
I feel like we've gone off topic just a little bit. Anyway, there were a couple of other questions. There was a couple of bits of feedback that were asking questions about our approach, and one of those was challenging the validity of using strokes gained as a metric over some of the more traditional metrics around fairways in regulation, greens in regulation, and number of putts. Andy Walker, have you got anything to say to that?
Yeah, look, I always used to measure my game by those traditional approaches, but as I've learnt in recent times, and certainly in our conversations have developed how I think about it, and then sort of the short experience I've had with Arcos. If you think about it, and in learning a little bit about strokes gained and how it works, if you're hitting your driver, say 270, 275 meters, but in the light rough, as opposed to taking a 3-iron off the tee and hitting it sort of 190, 200 meters on the fairway, your shot 270, 280 meters in the light rough is going to be of significant advantage than being 200 meters on the fairway. So, but one's a fairways in regulation and the other one's not. So when you're looking at the metric, specifically fairways in regulation, I think that isn't the best metric to use, because I can see how the drive in the light rough, you'll be significantly better off with a significantly shorter approach shot into the green, and you're going to make birdie hitting a 9-iron or a wedge rather than possibly a 4-iron, 5-iron from a lot further out.
I totally agree. And I think we've all played in a 4-ball where someone has teed off and cold topped one and it's rolled 100 meters and just crept on to the beginning of the fairway. And invariably there'll be that classic comment, which is hilarious, by the way. So if anyone out there says this on a regular basis, please keep it up, because it's the funniest thing in the world when you've cold topped a driver. But of course the call will go out and go, hey, at least it's a fairway in regulation, which is true, but you're not getting there for two. So I think
no,
all things being equal, hitting the fairway is better. Totally agree with that, but not at the expense of distance, which I think is where strokes gained melds those two things together. There was another piece of feedback which came back that was challenging our view, which we seem to have taken, and I don't think we've deliberately done this, but the numbers have led us in this direction, that there is more to be gained by improving your ball striking than there is by focusing your time on improving your short game, and in particular your putting. Now, I've got a very simple answer to this, and that is that I wouldn't ever say that you do it at the expense of putting work into your putting, and I think we'll both get to that when we talk about our improvement plans. And also, this, remember, is for amateur club golfers. This is probably not necessarily something that you'd be saying to PGA Tour pros who are all at an elite level of ball striking already. But take someone like myself, for example, playing off a 10, say I shoot 80 to 82, for a round, which is around about handicap. I've looked at my stats. My average number of putts this year, so this across 38 rounds, is 32.5 putts per round. Now, a golf course is set up as par 72 for played in regulation. You've got 36 putts, 2 putts per hole, and that leaves 36 shots tee to green. So if I'm shooting 80 odd, say 80 because the maths is easier, and I've got 32.5 putts, which is under regulation, obviously, because I'm chipping a fair bit. But what it means is tee to green, I've actually hit 47.5 shots to the regulation of 36. If you flipped that and you said, I was tee to green in 32.5, but I had 47.5 putts, well, obviously your putting's a problem, right? But I think where it's 36, and I just don't think people think about golf that way, but I'm obviously burning 11 and a half shots is more than my handicap tee to green, and I'm saving a few putting. So it's tee to green where I need to focus, I think, quite clearly.
Yeah. And look, I've always been very focused on ball striking. I think I mentioned last week that I did that to the exclusion of my short game and putting. And as you just mentioned, that's not a good thing either. But as amateurs, and certainly where I'm at sort of 4 or 5 and up, if you're 2 putting regularly on the vast majority of greens, then that's what your goal should be. It should be to two putt the majority of the greens, especially when you hit a green in regulation and you're 20 to 30 feet from the hole. Your main priority is just to lag the putt to the hole and two
100%.
putt it. So it's more for me about distance control and speed control rather than actually getting it in the hole.
I think the stats will back that up, because even at Tour Pro level, from 8 feet, they're 50-50.
Hmm.
So, to expect a club player and a handicap player, to expect them to be doing any better than that, I think is just not going to happen. And I know that the argument is that they're putting on much faster greens, and there's a lot of other challenges and some of those sorts of issues which exist, and I don't disagree with that. But broadly speaking, they are absolutely going to miss 50% of their putts from 8 feet. So I don't think we should expect to be any better. And we can spend a whole lot of time trying to get better, but there's a lot of low-hanging fruit with ball striking that I think we need to focus
I certainly
on.
think that if you can get to a point where you're hitting 8, 9 greens in regulation, 10 plus, you're starting to get into the more elite levels and sort of around sort of scratch marker and better, especially sort of then to get to 12 and even elite players, they're 13 greens in regulation, you're at the top of your game. So if you can get to 8, maybe 9 greens in regulation, you're going to be a single figure handicapper every day of the week.
Absolutely. So the message on that is really thank you so much for the feedback, for everyone that's dropped us a line. Please continue it, because we would like to start each of these shows just addressing any of those texts, emails, Facebook comments, any of those sorts of things that have come through.
It also gives us something to think about as well, and challenges us in our own thinking, which again is part of our journey.
That's exactly right. Speaking of journeys, Andy Walker, we are hopefully on one at the moment. And we talked last week about starting lines. We're talking about where we're at. We went through our games in some detail, and apologies for those of you who are listening that felt that was too much detail. But you know what? It was a conversation that needed to be had, because without assessing where you're at, you can't figure out where you need to get to. So tonight we're going to talk about the plans for the future and the things that we're going to do to try and develop. So it's been an interesting week, I think, thinking about what sorts of things need to happen, but also what sorts of things can happen in so far as, we're both guys with families, with jobs, with other commitments. We can't necessarily give those all away and train 5-6 days a week on golf. It'd be nice to be able to do that, but that's unrealistic. So this is trying to fit things in around life and trying to do it in a way where we can make commitments to actually stick to them, which I think we need to be hard on ourselves for. So,
yeah, I agree with that. And I've the way I've looked at it is what can I realistically achieve over the next 12 months, and how much time realistically can I put into the game over the next 12 months, but also be a bit more strategic about it, rather than just letting it happen or happening by accident. What can I do? And this is where I guess my business lessons can really come into their own, is that I can go about my planning with golf in a similar way to what I've planned my business. And that's sort of the approach that I've taken over the past few days in how I've developed this plan.
Which I kind of have taken a similar approach. So we tossed the coin before to see who would go first. Andy Walker won the toss and elected to field. So I'll be leading off. And look, it's been an interesting week, because I kind of started out thinking that I knew where I was going to end up in this planning process. And then I was listening back to episode 2 and listening to some of the things that we were talking about, just to make sure that I was addressing the right areas and on the right approach. And one of the things that stood out for me actually was listening to you, Mr. Walker, talking about how you've been to scratch before. You know what you need to do. It's a path that you've already walked. So you have a high degree of confidence that you've got the game to get there, and it's just a case of putting the right things in place. And that actually reminded me of the fact that I have never done this before. This is uncharted territory. So that then introduced a whole spiral of thinking around doubt and uncertainty and nervousness and questioning whether or not I actually even have the potential to achieve any of the things that we're talking about. Because I don't know at the moment, I don't know where the peak of my golf game can get to.
Mm.
I may have reached that. There might be more. But it's unknown territory because I'm at the lowest handicap point that I have ever been. So that kind of gave me a few things to think about. And I think just to round out that thought, where I got to in the end is that I've had a couple of rounds now, which have been at differentials of 4.5 and 5, which I think that probably gives me the confidence that there's more to give than being a 10 handicapper.
Yeah,
But
look, and in
interested in
saying
your
that,
thoughts.
yeah, and look, I've got a bit of a different perspective on that, and I think we talked about this in the first episode. Is that I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit for the knowledge that you've got through your cricketing career. Now, you
Mm,
and I probably played at about the same level, you cricket and me with golf. So you know what it's like to be effectively a scratch handicapper at cricket,
mm,
right? So you know the mental application, the mental competencies that are required, and then how much practice you're going to have to put in from a physical perspective to be able to get to scratch. So I think for you, a lot of the skills are already there. So when you say you're questioning yourself as to whether you've peaked or whether you've got it in you to get to scratch, I think we probably need to come back to the conversation you had with your PE teacher, your dashingly handsome PE teacher, apparently.
and there it is. It's all been made up for. Yeah.
and come back to that mindset and come back to that thinking of, okay, well, you're currently 10. What level of thinking do you need to get to scratch? So that's where I think you don't give yourself enough credit
Yeah.
for bringing your past experience into where you are and what the journey is going to be.
No, it's all good points. And I feel like over the last week or so, I've kind of, ebbed and flowed through that thought process of, yes, there's enough evidence to suggest that there's still quite a bit of improvement left in my game, and I'm sure there is. Like I'm honestly sure there is. Um, but at the same time, there's just that level of unknown, and
Mm.
because I haven't done it before, it also then made me start to think about this in practical terms, and this was a worthwhile thought process. So I looked at that and I went, okay, well, I haven't achieved this before. I haven't done this before. So therefore, for me to just do the things that I've always done, well, that's not going to deliver the results, right?
No,
Like if I'm trying to achieve an outcome that I've never achieved before, I'm going to have to do some things that I have never done before and get outside of the comfort zone and actually, kind of try and stretch the parameters a little bit. So
correct.
that actually started to form the basis of my thinking. So I boiled it down in that I would look at actions to take and I'd put them into one of three categories, which was either, firstly, things that have been demonstrated to work for other people. So looking around and go, all right, well, what have other players done that have achieved these sorts of things, and what can I do? Things that have worked for me in other settings. So you talked about cricket, but I'd bring business into that as well, like one of some of those mental approaches and disciplines that work
Absolutely.
in a business setting and even a family setting that you could apply in a golf setting. And then three is just flat out stuff I've never done before. And if it doesn't fit into one of these three brackets, I'm going to throw it away. So
Fair enough.
it's got to be one of those three. So that's
Yep.
where that was my approach. So hopefully that makes sense. So I've looked at it in three areas. So firstly is specifically golf skills. So ball striking, etc. The second is the mental approach, and then the third is lifestyle. So physical lifestyle elements. So to boil it down, for golf skills, this was an interesting one because there's a lot here that I don't know. So the first item in terms of building golf skills is actually arranging a lesson from a professional to develop a full practice plan. So
Mm.
effectively, my first item in developing my plan is to develop a plan.
Mm.
I really
Excellent.
feel like we're making ground there.
We're planning the plan.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
I like
So
it. I
anyway,
like it.
anyhow, I think it's necessary because I have never had a lesson at all.
Mm.
Interestingly, why have I never had a lesson? Um, Partly time, partly cost, partly because I probably haven't thought that I had the time to practice to make a lesson worthwhile. But also, this is a bit of a left field one. I hate the term having a lesson. I would rather get a coach
Mm.
and have a training plan and
Yep.
go and practice rather than having a teacher and having a lesson. It just, to me, the language feels wrong. But
Yeah.
maybe that's something for golf more broadly to think about. It feels very old school and very powered, dynamic driven, and all those sorts of things. So, and being someone that couldn't wait to get out of school when it comes to sport, I don't want to go back into the classroom and have another lesson.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand that completely. But
Yeah.
if you think about that language that's used, and especially when you look at tour players, they don't talk about going and having a lesson. They've got coaches, and they've
Yeah.
got their swing coaches, they've got their short game coaches, they've got their mental coaches, they've got all sorts of coaches that they've got. So you make a really valid point that getting a coach is certainly, an important part of the process.
Yeah. And that's going to be the conversation that I have. So, what I don't want to do is to go and, just have someone go, oh, you're holding the club wrong with your grip, move your top hand around and do it like this. What I do want to do is have someone go, this is where you're currently at. This is the destination you want to get to. Let's work on a development plan and a training plan, and actually work together over this for a period of time, not just fixing symptoms, if that makes sense. And I think that might mean that I need to talk to more than one club pro to get the right
Yeah.
person that's actually going to partner.
And I'd really recommend that. So do you know what you want in a coach? Have you figured that out yet, or that's part of the planning for the plan?
Yeah, I feel like that's part of the planning for the plan. To be honest, I think I've got a bit of an idea. I want somebody who, yeah, who's not just looking at the quick fix. I want someone that actually wants to help get to a destination, wants to look at my game as a whole, and develop a plan to to help me improve, not just to say here's a technical change that you need to go away and work on without any context. So I think we need to start big picture and work down from there. Anyhow, moving on, the next item was actually looking at some sort of things I can do at home. So I have ordered a hitting net to smack balls into at home.
Nice.
Which I feel might be necessary because I don't really have access to a driving range.
Away from windows?
Ideally, yes. At least away from my own windows. So sorry to any of the neighbours. Also, with that in mind, is looking at something like the Adam Young strike plan. I have been very impressed both by Adam Young and his podcast partner, John Sherman, and some of the work that they do. Adam Young more the technical or the ball striking. He's really all about impact and ball striking side of things. John is more about the mental approach. I like both of their theories, so I think that could be something to look at.
And we've talked a lot about John Sherman. I mean, I've bought his book and an audio book, and I'm actually quite interested in his in John Sherman's coaching course, training course, and buying that. So it'd be interesting to see what the differences are there.
Yeah, I did read his book also, and I thought it was excellent. So there's that. And then the other thing, because I don't want to ignore the short game, I think that there is value in still doing that. And so one of the things that I want to do is committing to practicing just half-hour session, 2 mornings a week on the way to work, stopping by the golf course and having a bit of a putt for half an hour on the practice green, just to keep some of those skills up. And obviously planning to plan, I need to figure out a few good drills to actually make the most out of that time. So that's my golf skills section. Thoughts, Andy Walker? Am I missing anything?
Yeah, look, I think that's a good start. Again, I think that when it comes to engaging a coach, I think that you really need to figure out what it is that you're after in a coach. It's one of the things that I've been thinking about over the past week, as to, because there are some older school coaches that will, they're very, very good, but they come at it from more, say, the fairways and greens and regulation, and they don't really have a stats based approach to what they're doing. So, do you want someone who's going to incorporate what you're doing with shot scope and have a stats based approach, or do you want something that's going to be a bit more, I guess, flexible in the approach?
No, I think I need whoever I choose to actually kind of engage in the process that we're going down, and someone ideally that sort of shares a similar philosophy to the game. Happy for it to be challenged, obviously, but I'd like to make sure that we're working on the same things. But also, I'd like to make sure that it's someone as well that is prepared to use a lot of the modern theories around impact is more important than how pretty your swing looks. Sort of making sure that we're working on the right things, not just working on the aesthetics. So there's that. Mental approach is part two. So the elements that I've identified, and this is where we fall into the brackets of things I've never done before. So this could be interesting. See how this goes. So I might start in the safe zones, and that's in the areas of things that I have done before that I know works and did absolutely help in getting the improvement that I've had so far. The first thing there is around the on-course approach and really understanding your surroundings, looking at each hole, identifying where the dangers lie, aiming appropriately, and aiming appropriately, understanding the expectations of your shot outcomes, that you're standing on the tee box with a shotgun, not a sniper rifle. And the higher your handicap is, the more that dispersion will be there. So making sure that you get the bulk of that dispersion away from danger. But then also understanding that with those expectations, that you're going to hit a lot of shots that you might consider a bad shot, but they're actually within your natural dispersion range. So you don't get upset about it because you understand, well, that's a shot that I'm going to hit. So that's fine.
It's within the expectations.
Yeah, that's right. And there'll be the odd one that's not. And that's when, maybe you have a look at whether or not you committed to the process and all those other technical things. But just accepting the outcomes, moving on, find the ball, hit the next one, and go through the process and stay in every single shot, not getting too far ahead of yourself, and certainly not living in the past. So that's a big one.
I certainly think that will make the game a lot more enjoyable as well. A, for your playing partners, and B, for yourself.
It does, and the time when I was able to stick to that process was last month in the monthly medal down at Bathurst Golf Club, when I managed to shoot a 77 to win the A grade medal. It's the best round of golf I think I've actually ever put together.
Nice.
Not necessarily the best number, but it's the best round of golf. And that was the value there was knowing that there was a good round happening and not getting too excited and not thinking about getting to the clubhouse, but actually playing every shot and giving every shot the full process.
Stay in the moment.
Yeah. So hard to do, but with the right attitude, the right outlook, and the right pre-shot routine makes a big difference. So keep continuing that and really focusing on that is a big one. The next one is around adjustment of my self-image. So for a long time, when I was looking at myself as a mid to high teen handicapper, things never moved because that great quote that you can never be any better than you believe you can be. And adjusting that expectation of saying, no, I'm going to think about myself as a 10 handicapper. Lo and behold, about 6 months later, that's what happened. But I haven't adjusted that self-image yet, so I need to do that, and I need to bring that down to 5 or lower. You don't want to go too far too quickly, because if it becomes unrealistic, then it just doesn't work in the human brain. So I think 5 is probably the right place at the moment.
That's 12 months we're talking, yeah. So in 12 months' time, we're aiming for a 5 handicap.
Yeah, as an outcome, yes, but as an action is to start thinking like that now.
Right.
So it's more about, rather than worrying about the actual outcomes, because what I'm trying to focus on is things that you can do, not the results that you get, for obvious reasons, for setting action items. So that's one that can flick the switch tomorrow, but you've got to start believing it, and that will actually certainly help. The next two are ones, mindful that we're spending a lot of time on my topics here, and we want to get to yours. The next two are ones that I haven't tried before, but I have heard they work really well for a lot of high level players in not just golf, but in all sports. The first one is meditation. I've never really been able to get into this. It's a bit too out there.
Yeah, it hasn't been my thing, I have to say. It's a bit woo-woo for me.
Yeah.
However, in saying that, I know that a lot of people do, and a lot of PGA Tour pros do, and they get really good results from it.
Yeah. So I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid. I'm going to get on board. I hope. I'll make the commitment. We're putting it out there. We're going to give it a go. See how it goes. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure it will be one of those things, easy to start, hard to stick to. So we need to
Have you made
make
a
some
commitment as
commitments.
to like when and how many times per week?
So I feel like I don't want to load the mornings up too much,
Because
but from
you've already
everything that
got two doing short game and putting.
yeah, yeah, but from everything that I have read, and please, if there's anyone out there that knows more about this, please drop us a line on the Missing Links Golf Show Facebook page. But my understanding is that first thing in the morning is the best time to do it to set yourself up for the day.
Yep.
So I think that will be the aim. Yeah, just try and do that for 10 minutes in the morning. Like, surely that's possible, you would think. The next one, again, haven't done it, feels a bit out there, but again, a lot of people, Will Zalatoris and others, Matty Fitzpatrick, those sorts of people do this religiously and believe that it gives great results. And that's doing a bit of just a very fast journaling after each practice session and each round. And the
Okay.
focus is on capturing the positives because the human brain is so good at remembering the negatives and it
Yep.
forgets the positives. So it's about capturing the positives. So that's one that I've got on there for the mental approach.
So
Thoughts on that?
that's both games and practice.
Yeah. So you might just jot a couple of notes down, like today in practice, I felt like I had really good balance whilst I was hitting putts. I don't know. It might be, we'll see. I'll read a few out, okay, in the next episode. So
Looking
it'll be
forward to it. Looking forward
story
to it.
time with Uncle Steve. And then the last one is around lifestyle items. And look, very, very simply, this is around just taking some steps for health and fitness. So the first one really is taking control of the morning routine. So having a plan, getting up in time to get things done, committing to doing 3 weights workouts per week. They don't have to be huge, just dumbbells,
Yep.
those sorts of things, but I think it's important. And then at a minimum every day, just taking the time to do 20 push-ups and 20 sit-ups each day. And the last one is making
Squats as
sure
well.
squat. Okay, I'll let
Yeah.
squats. And the last one is making sure that I get to the 10,000 steps mark every day. I do it a lot, but then there's also a lot of days when there's a lot of meetings when I might only get to say 2 to 3,000. So, and all that's required then is just get out when you get home, go for a walk.
Yeah.
So, yep. So that's the plan, Andy Walker. That's it.
Great.
That's my commitments.
Oh, that's good. I mean, as long as you've, and I think what I didn't, if I can give you a bit of feedback, what I didn't hear is the specifics of when you're going to do it. And that's one of the things that I've really had to think about is actually making a commitment to and trying to be really specific around when I do certain things. And putting that into plan. So committing. So one of my commitments is on a Tuesday morning. I'm going to either practice or play in the comp. So it's very specific that's what I do on a Tuesday morning.
Yep.
So I think I'd like to see a little bit more, I guess, specific around when you're going to, like you've said, you're going to practice a short game of putting 2 days a week. Well, what 2 days are they?
It's a good question. No, it's good. It's good. I will do that and I'll resubmit my assignment for marking.
Yes,
so,
please.
Yeah. So thank you. Your turn. What do you got?
Okay. Well, I've put together what I think is about as comprehensive as I need at this point in time. I've come at it from a similar perspective to what you have, in that I've got various buckets that I've put my strategies into, being play and practice, practice structure when I do practice, stats, fitness, and then opportunities for further development. So if you look at sort of goals and what I'd like to achieve in 12 months, I haven't put a handicap in here. It's been more around the ARCOS and ARCOS stats and the stack stats, or one stat in particular. So from last week, where I currently am in relation to a scratch handicapper is that I've got a strokes gained of -7.3, of which driving's -1.6, approach is -2.6, short game is -2.1, and putting is -1. So where I'd like to be in 12 months' time, I'd like to be more consistent across the different areas of my game. So the
So everything at about -5, is that?
that's going the wrong way.
Oh,
Just quietly. Yeah. So that would put me back up at about 20, and I think we've already covered a couple of times that this is going to be a very short
it would be
podcast. If that's
consistent though, Andy Walker. That's the
it
point.
would be consistent, which is why I've
Yeah.
actually put some numbers there, which
Very
is sort
good.
of the next part of the equation. So what I've put on paper is I'd like my driving to be -1, my approach play to be -1, my short game to be -1, and my putting to be -0.05. So effectively, my strokes gained would be -3.5. So I'm a little bit more than halving my strokes gained in relation to a scratch handicap, with the focus more on approach and short game. So I'm going to have to lose or gain, I should say, 1.6 shots with my approach play and 1.1 shots with my short game. So that's sort of from a stats perspective with Arcos. Now, with the stack and my driver e-speed, so we covered last week that my driver e-speed is 106 miles per hour. So that's right on the average Champions Tour. I would like to get that in 12 months to the average PGA Tour. So that's 113 miles per hour. Now,
that is a big goal.
That's a pretty big goal. Whether I can get, 7 miles per hour is a pretty big, and I've come at it from a miles per hour just so I've got that like for like with the Champions Tour and PGA Tour, just because that's how I've sort of measured where I'm at. Now, I've watched a few videos on the stack, and there are golfers using the stack who have managed to get make gains of say 10 miles per hour with so I don't think 7 is outside of the possibility. It's a bit of a stretch goal, but I'd really like to, that's really where I'd like to be.
I mean, theoretically, there's no reason why you couldn't do it. There's plenty of golfers getting around in their early 50s that are still bumping the ball out. There's significant differences. So I think physically there's no reason that you couldn't do that. So.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'd like to think that I'm still physically capable of increasing my swing speed by that amount. So then, when it comes to the plan on how I'm going to get there, so I've taken a bit of a approach, sort of similar to one of the finance methodologies that I'm aware of. I know you're a fan of this methodology as well. Is the pay yourself first approach. So for those who don't know, the pay yourself first approach is where you take your net income and you allocate a certain percentage of that, say 10%, to savings and or in investment. And then the 90% you live off the remainder. So I've taken that approach to my time. So what I did last weekend, I went back, and so I planned my time out by quarter, and I went back and I allocated time to play golf for the December quarter. So usually 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the quarter, I'll go and plan out all my client visits. So I've now allocated time in my schedule, which I've never really done before, to be able to play golf. And that is on a Tuesday morning, and that's my practice range, or I'm going to go play in the comp. And then on a Saturday afternoon, I'm going to have a short game and putting session. Now, I've got to have a bit of flexibility, because the way that that my quarter works is that I usually have a really, really full-on month. Then I'll have a quiet month, and then I'll have one that's about in between. So I've got to have a little bit of flexibility, because obviously if I don't fulfill my client obligations, I'm not going to get paid. And
which
that's
brings
going
its own problems. Yeah.
That's gonna have a few little issues. So the allowances that I've made is that in my full-on month, I'm allowed to drop 1 practice session per week. Now, that doesn't mean that I can drop 2 in a week and make it up by doing 2 the next week. It just means that I'm having a touch point with golf at least once a week during my full-on month.
a really good point, because one of the questions I was going to ask is, even though you've got those busy periods, are you going to set yourself minimum obligations for your
Yes.
golf preparation? Yeah. So that's
Yes.
good.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah, yeah. And then during the quiet and in between month, I'm going to allow myself to drop one practice session per fortnight, and that's like, my uncle had his 80th birthday last Saturday, so I couldn't have a practice session last Saturday. Life comes up, so
Yeah.
so that's, I've got to have some allowances within that. So that during the quieter months, that gives me, you know, a lot more time to be able to play and practice and sharpen my game, with then at least one touch point during my full-on month.
Mm.
So that's how I've planned out my practice sessions from a time perspective. So then when it comes to practice structure, what I'd like to be able to do obviously playing the comp is pretty self-explanatory. On a Tuesday morning, when I'm actually at the driving range, I'm going to split that into 60% full swings, 9-iron to driver, 40% with my wedges. That's 100 meters or 50 meters to 100 meters. And then on a Saturday afternoon, the 2-hour session I've got on a Saturday afternoon, it'll be an hour and a half chipping, pitching, and then 30 minutes of putting and putting drills.
Okay. So a question that I've got for that: range sessions are interesting. Range sessions, even short game facility sessions, are interesting, because I don't think a lot of people know how to do them properly. And I probably put myself in that bracket. There's a lot of conversation that you hear around the place about the difference between block practice, differential practice. There's another type in there as well, which I can't remember the name of at the moment, but essentially block practice, grab a 7-iron, smack 30 of them, do the same thing over and over again. You're grooving out a swing, you're trying to work on something specific. Yep. Differential practice, random practice was the other one. Random practice is where you go, I'm going to hit a driver at a certain target, and then based on that result, I'm going to grab maybe a 5-iron, because that's going to be my approach. So I'm just trying to replicate the game a little bit more, so you're not just doing the same thing over and over again. And importantly, each shot you do, you step away from the bay, you go through your routine again, and you're doing all those things to try and make it as real as possible. And then differential practice is one of the ones that Adam Young talks about in some of his work, which is where you're going in your skill building, saying, I'm going to take my whatever club and I'm going to try and hit 5 off the toe, 5 off the heel, 5 off the center, and you're actually working on club face control. Or you might be saying, I'm going to hit a few with the club face wide open, I'm going to hit a few really closing the club face. So you know how to actually work on specific skills. So are you going to work any of that sort of stuff into your program on the range, or is it just beating balls?
No, definitely. So, and I've been doing this for a little while now, is splitting the bucket of balls up into 10 balls. So for instance, say I've got 100 balls, I'll split that into 10 lots of 10.
Which is good maths for you.
It's very, very good maths for me. And then what I'll do is I'll hit 10 shots with a specific club, and that's taking my full routine as I would on the golf course. So at the start of each shot, I'll go back, I'll line up my target, and then I'll walk in as if I'm playing a full shot. So that's not just putting the next ball down and hitting it. It is going through my full pre-shot routine to hit it. So I'll hit 10 balls, say with an 8-iron, and then I'll put the club in the bag, pull out a 5-iron, and I'll hit 10 balls with that 5-iron. And again, I'll go through my full pre-shot routine for that. And obviously, hitting at a different target.
Excellent. Okay. Have you got more?
Yeah. Yeah. So then, from a stats perspective, I'm committing to, in comp rounds and practice rounds, to always use the Arcos technology so that I can build my data sets.
Yep.
So that will give me a better understanding of my game. The stack, I'm going to, on a Tuesday, usually afternoon, I'll have a stack session, and then a Friday morning I'll have a stack session as well. So twice a week is my plan in my schedule to use the stack. From a fitness perspective, I have been training 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, resistance training and a cross trainer, again, building strength and a little bit of stamina. I've put some stretching in there. Sometimes I'm good with stretching, sometimes not so
That's
much.
a good point. I might add
You
that.
need some flexibility.
Yeah.
So I've put stretching in there every night. I've got a pretty good stretching routine. I was given that a very long time ago, which I can't say I've stuck to it, but it's been there and I've done it relatively often, which has maintained some flexibility or enough flexibility to be able to still swing the golf club reasonably competent. So that's sort of 5 areas of how I'm going to go about my play and practice. Opportunities for further development, which was that last bucket, engaging a coach. And that's going to be, I've actually started talking to a particular coach, and
That's a good start.
They're very stats driven. So they've got a facility which goes across your whole game, including mental approach, and very, very stats driven. So
how do they measure mental approach? Any insights there?
It's my understanding is it's the same. It's the same approach that Jason Day has used.
Right.
So I'm not 100% familiar with what it is. I've just sort of read a very high level view on it. So I haven't had a chance to really do a lot of research, but I know it's part of their golfing program.
Interesting. That could be a topic for another episode, I think.
Yeah.
I think the mental side we need to dive into for a full episode at some point.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And the two other opportunities for further development, club fitting, which
100%.
At some stage I will do. It's probably not appropriate right now, but 4 to 6 months, it probably will be.
So can I just jump in on that topic? Because it's a favorite.
Yeah, I do. No, it's a favorite of yours.
Fair enough. Like the timing's got to be right, financially and all those other things as well, because it is not a cheap process.
And I do have some commitments at the moment financially, which means it's not appropriate at the moment to be able to spend multiple $1,000s on a set of golf clubs, but that's going to change. 4 to 6 months is going to be a different proposition, which is why I've got that.
Can I make a suggestion for you?
Yep.
Just, you don't have to follow it, as I know you won't if you don't like it. I've known you long enough. And that is, understand all the things you've just said. I think the urgent fitting requirement in your bag is driver. Okay. Now, I really want to know the answer to this question of whether or not you're in the right or wrong driver, head, shaft, match up, the whole thing. Even though you don't need to buy it immediately, can you please go and get the fitting done sooner rather than later? Because I'm dying to know the answer to this question of what suits your game.
I will definitely ask that question. I had thought about that. One of the things that is part of the first lesson that we've talked about is doing the full TrackMan stats analysis session, so that we can understand exactly where my golf game is from a TrackMan stats perspective, and then I'll present the plan that I have, and I'm sure that there'll be some changes and suggestions made to how I can alter that plan.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. That's exciting. I want to.
Yeah.
We need resolution.
I'll get that. I'll get that information when I commit and have my first lesson.
Excellent. That is exciting.
Last one, which is going to be an interesting journey, and I'm really interested in learning more about this technique, is Aimpoint. I bought the Aimpoint system. Yes. And I've done a little bit of initial looking at it. And I'm very
Mark Sweeney.
Mark Sweeney.
Sweeney,
I listened to him talk recently, and it got me interested, because I've always thought, well, I haven't really thought too much about Aimpoint, to be honest with you. I know Adam Scott and now a number of the tool pros use Aimpoint, but I've never really given it that much thought. And I heard him talking about it, more so in relation to slow play, in that Aimpoint gets blamed for slow play. And Mark Sweeney says that's actually, if you're doing Aimpoint correctly, it actually is a faster approach.
Yeah.
than looking at the putt from all angles. And yeah,
I've
he's
heard the, I mean, I've heard the same defense applied to Patrick Cantlay. Jury's out on that one, but
mm,
yes, I have heard that story.
yeah, yeah. So it's going to be interesting. I haven't been out in the golf course. I've watched the video. I haven't been out in the golf course or on the practice green to try it, but that is one thing that it in watching the video, logically it makes sense to me. So
Mm.
if logically it makes sense, then I'm going to go and have a crack and see if it works.
Yeah, no, that is really interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing how that goes. And I think um, everyone would be really interested to know how it works. But unfortunately, we are going to be bound by copyright on this to not be able to
Yes,
actually give away any
correct.
of the secrets
Yeah.
on the show, which is a shame, but that is the reality of copyright law.
Mm.
But you can absolutely give us the feedback on whether or not it works and how much of a difference it makes to your game, and then people can go away and make their own decisions.
Yeah, well, certainly, I'll do that, and we'll be able to see it with strokes gained, and
Yeah,
if I decide to implement that into my game, then certainly from a strokes gained perspective, we've got the baseline measurement here. So
that's right.
if all of a sudden my strokes gained goes from -1 to 0, then it's a really, really good thing.
Yeah, that is exciting, and that is a good list. I think we have gone a little bit over with tonight's episode, but I think there's a lot of really good information in there. And Andy Walker, I would like to make a suggestion for both of us,
Yep.
for all of our listeners, is that we firm up these training plans a little bit more. I'll put some commitments on them with dates and times and some of those sorts of things. Maybe we pretty them up on a PDF or something like that and pop them on the Facebook page as a resource, because I think one of the things when we started out on this show was that we were doing it because we wanted to figure out how to get better. We had a desire to improve our game, and we wanted to try and get better. And so doing this was a way of actually giving ourselves some structure to do that. I think it's fair to say that a lot of people that would be listening because they also want to get better, but they probably just don't really know how to start because they haven't had the reason or the time or the opportunity to sit down and think about it.
And
So if we
and
can
and that's
share
what
that.
I never really did. I never really thought about how I was going to go about golf and how to structure it and how to put a framework in place so that I can play and practice more. Which this whole process, even in 3 episodes, this has given me so much more food for thought than what I'd probably had for the last 27 years in relation to golf.
Which is crazy because we've not even got any advice from anyone that knows what they're talking about yet. It's
No,
just us talking about it.
yeah,
But it's true. It's interesting. Like I've thought about going and getting, finding a coach. I'm not going to say getting a lesson, but finding a coach. I've thought about doing that for years, but never got around to doing it. But this is going to be
now
the impetus to do that.
you're committed to
That's
doing
it.
it.
That's exactly right. So we will do that. We will pop that on the Facebook page as soon as we possibly can. Some other really exciting news is for the first time in the history of this podcast. It's really 2 weeks when you look
It is
at
2 weeks.
episode 1 and 3 only being separated by 2 weeks. I am playing a comp round this Saturday.
Nice.
So that's in a couple of days now from recording time. So it'll be literally tomorrow morning, probably from when this podcast gets released. So I'm playing a comp round this Saturday at my dad's club. So that's exciting. We'll get out, and it is an individual Stableford with a better ball in conjunction. So no pressure, Donny, but don't let me down. Anyway, I will report back in the next episode as to how that went with a bit of a rundown, and we'll see whether or not that has been a round that nudges me back into single digits or whether or not I continue to sit there and just kind of dwell around the 10 mark. So there's a lot riding on that round.
Yeah, well, I haven't booked into any comp rounds over the next couple of weeks, so I've still got my 2.8 round hanging
Still
over
sitting
my
there.
head. Yeah, it's still sitting there as my 20th round. So yeah, I went to the range yesterday, which was really good. Had a really good range session, and next week I've actually been invited out to play Magenta Shores again, which I'm really looking forward to. But that won't be a comp round,
Shame.
so I'm going to have to shift my Tuesday day to Friday next week because I'm playing on Friday.
I see. And probably just a point worth raising for all of our many listeners in the US and in Japan. I'm not quite sure how it works in Japan, but I do know a little bit about how it works in the US, where pretty much any round that you play, you can submit to I think it's the GIN app, the Golf Handicap, whatever the other two numbers, Index Jobby. Anyway, you submit any round that you play, and then that becomes a handicapping round. That's my understanding of it. In Australia, it's different. It has to be a comp round. So if
Designated comp round.
so if we went out and just played 18 holes together,
Socially,
even if we kept score, we can't submit it. So it has to be comp rounds, has to be under tournament conditions. So I do think that sometimes makes it harder. It definitely makes it harder to play a lot. But it also means that every handicap round that you've got is actually under tournament conditions. With all the pressures and nerves and everything that comes. So I like it. I think it's good. It doesn't really matter if I like it or not. That's the way it is.
That is.
This Saturday is an opportunity to get out and see if we can get back into the nines or lower.
Nice.
I will keep you posted.
Good luck.
Thank you. But ladies and gentlemen, because we do have some female listeners out there as well. It's good to know this is not a men's only podcast. There's a lot of women out there that play golf and that are interested. So for everyone, thank you so much for listening. We will pop as much of this information as we possibly can on the Facebook page. So get on it. That is the Missing Links Golf Show on Facebook. Please also, if you haven't already, subscribe, tick the auto download box on our podcast on whatever streaming service that you're listening to it from. Please feel free to give us a review. 5-star ones are always more welcome than anything else. But honesty is important in this world as well. And don't forget to just drop a comment on the Facebook page. Give us a few questions, give us some feedback, give us something to think about for the next episode if there's things in particular that you're interested to hear about.
Yeah,
but otherwise,
feedback's good.
Yeah, absolutely. But otherwise, we will absolutely be back to talk about a review of Saturday's round and also to get into some more interesting topics about our development. And we'll continue periodically to give updates about how we're going with our commitments. And on that point, Andy Walker, we need for the next episode to come up with a way to keep each other accountable to these plans, because plans are one thing, but following through is far more important. So
yes, accountability.
Think about that. That's right.
I like it.
So that's it for this week. A bit longer than normal, but thank you so much for hanging in there. Have a fantastic week. I'll talk to you next week, Andy Walker. It's been a lot of fun.
See you next week.